It was a hot, sticky summer evening when Michael and his friends, Daniel, Sarah, and Jessica, found themselves lost in the middle of nowhere. Their road trip had been fun at first. They had been driving for hours, eager to explore the small, mysterious towns scattered across the countryside. But now, the sun was beginning to set, and the GPS had given up on them long ago. The trees around them thickened into an almost impenetrable forest, and the road narrowed, its surface cracked and uneven. They had taken a wrong turn somewhere along the way, and every attempt to reorient themselves only led them deeper into unfamiliar terrain. "I'm telling you, we've been on this road for way too long," Sarah muttered, her voice tinged with frustration. "I know, but we have to find a town soon." "It's getting dark," Michael replied, his knuckles tightening around the steering wheel. Then, out of nowhere, a rusted sign appeared at the side of the road. It was so old, its wood was weathered and chipped, the paint peeling. "Welcome to Black Hollow, established 1876. Daniel squinted at it. "Black Hollow?" he asked, confusion in his voice. "I've never heard of this place." "Neither have I," Sarah added, scrolling through her phone. "It doesn't even show up on the map. But the town is probably just off the main road. Let's check it out. We could ask for directions and maybe find a place to stay for the night." Michael turned the steering wheel, and they slowly drove down the overgrown road toward the town. As the trees opened up into the clearing, a sense of unease washed over the group. The streets were empty, eerily so. There were no cars parked along the curb, no people walking around, not even a stray animal in sight. The houses, old and worn, had windows covered in grime. The once vibrant paint on their exteriors was now peeling away, leaving only faded memories of better days. As they drove deeper into the town, they noticed how silent everything felt. It was as though the very air itself was still, as if time had come to a halt. "I don't like this," Jessica said, glancing around nervously. "Come on, don't be so dramatic," Daniel laughed, but there was a nervous edge to his voice. They drove to the center of town, where an old-fashioned gas station stood, its neon light flickering weakly. The sign read, "Open 24 hours." They pulled up to the station, and Michael turned off the engine. The moment they stepped out of the car, the air felt cold, unusually cold for a summer evening. Inside the gas station, the smell was musty, the air stale. The shelves were lined with products from another era, boxes of cereal, cans of soup, all bearing labels that hadn't been used in decades. The dusty floorboards creaked beneath their feet as they walked in, the air unnervingly silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights above. Behind the counter stood a thin man, his face pale, his eyes dark and hollow. He didn't look up as they entered, as if he had been expecting them. "Can I help you?" he asked in a low, raspy voice. Michael hesitated before speaking. "We were just passing through. The road's been confusing. Is there a way out of here?" The man's eyes flicked toward the door, then back to Michael. "You shouldn't be here." The words seemed to hang in the air, thick with warning. "Why?" Daniel asked, attempting to brush off the unease creeping up his spine. "We just need directions. The GPS isn't working." The man shook his head slowly. "It won't let you leave. Not after dark." Everyone exchanged glances. "Who?" Jessica asked. "Who won't let us leave?" The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared at the door, as if expecting something to come through. Then he muttered, "The town. It takes what it wants, and it won't let you go." The air in the gas station turned colder, and Michael felt a chill crawl down his spine. They left the gas station in silence, each of them processing the strange warning. They climbed back into the car, but when Michael started the engine, it sputtered and died. The car was completely out of power. "That's impossible," Michael said, his voice edged with panic. "I filled the tank up before we left. This doesn't make sense." Sarah pushed open her door and stepped out, looking at the sky. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the town bathed in eerie twilight. "We need to get to the highway," she said, trying to sound confident. "We'll walk to the next town. Let's go." They started down the road on foot, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the silent air. But after a few minutes of walking, they found themselves back at the same spot, staring at the same empty street they had passed earlier. "No way," Daniel muttered, looking around. "This can't be happening. We just walked for 10 minutes. Michael glanced around nervously. Something was wrong. And then they heard it. Knock, knock. The sound came from somewhere down the street. It was sharp, unnatural, and filled with a deep sense of foreboding. "Who's there?" Jessica called out, her voice shaky. Silence. Another knock. Louder this time. Knock. 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 The knocking was followed by a soft whisper that seemed to come from all directions. Go home. Michael's heart began to race. We need to leave. Now. But when they turned to run, they realized Daniel was gone. 1 second he was right behind them, and the next he had vanished into thin air. Panic surged through them as they searched the streets, shouting Daniel's name. But there was no answer. As they searched, they found themselves drawn to the old church at the far end of town. The bell tower loomed above them, and the low, mournful toll of the bell echoed through the dead air. Dong! Dong! The door to the church creaked open on its own. They hesitated before stepping inside, their flashlights barely illuminating the dusty interior. Inside, the air was thick, as if it had been sealed away for years. The pews were covered in dust, and the stained glass windows were cracked, casting fractured patterns of colored light onto the floor. But what caught their attention was the shadowy figures standing in the far corners of the room. Figures with pale, hollow faces and eyes that seemed to follow them wherever they moved. Suddenly, they realized that the church wasn't empty. These figures were people who had come to Black Hollow and never left. And as they turned to flee, the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. The figures began to stir, their movements slow and deliberate as they closed in on the terrified trio. The clock on the wall struck midnight, and the shadows surrounding them seemed to grow taller, more menacing. The town had come alive in the dead of night, its haunting whispers filling the air. The figures were no longer distant, they were closing in. Michael grabbed Sarah's arm. We have to get out of here, now. But the figures blocked their path. One step forward, its face empty of all emotion. You belong to Black Hollow now, the figure whispered. Michael tried to fight back, but his hands passed through the figure, as though it wasn't real. And then, everything went dark. The next morning, the sun rose over Black Hollow, painting the empty town in a pale light. The streets were silent once more. The gas station's neon sign flickered one last time before going dark. The diner's doors creaked open, but no one was inside. A new sign appeared at the entrance of the town. Welcome to Black Hollow, population 4. For now.